The music industry has been rocked to its core by startling news from Miami. Camron and Jim Jones, the renowned pillars of Dipset, have allegedly been detained following a violent backstage incident that left security astonished, fans breathless, and the hip-hop community in complete astonishment. Multiple sources are reporting that what was supposed to be a joyous reunion concert devolved into a full-fledged fight between two former brothers in arms. Yes, you heard that correctly. Fists were thrown, angry words were exchanged, and what happened next? Pure pandemonium. According to eyewitnesses, it began as a heated disagreement about the performance order, but swiftly escalated into something far more sinister. Broken equipment, shattered egos, and flashing police lights. Within minutes, Camron and Jim were supposedly handcuffed and carried away as cameras rolled and social media erupted. Fans are startled, with many wondering whether this actually marks the end of Dipset. What could have caused such a public collapse between two legends? Stay tuned, because what comes next isn't just stunning, it's genuine emotional drama that no one expected. And believe us, this is only the beginning. It all began on a night intended to be a celebration. Fans flocked to see the long-awaited reunion of Dipset, which included Camron, Jim Jones, Jules Santana, and Freaky Zeke. The space was alive with nostalgia, with people wearing vintage Dipset gear, playing classic music on their phones, and exchanging tales about how these artists inspired a whole period of hip-hop. But no one knew that tension had been brewing behind the scenes for weeks, and it was about to break tonight in a way that would change everything. Around midnight, word began to spread. Whispers quickly transformed into furious social media posts, and video footage from backstage began to surface. At first, it was difficult to understand what was going on. Shaky camera, blurred faces, muffled screams. But one thing was clear: Camron and Jim Jones were in the midst of a violent argument, and it wasn't just verbal. Chairs were toppled, equipment was broken, and shouts were loud. People watching the footage couldn't believe it. Two brothers, previously inseparable, were now fighting only minutes before they were meant to enter the stage together. Fans were surprised, perplexed, and devastated. According to accounts, the dispute started over something as little as a modification in the set list. Apparently, Jim Jones intended to begin the performance with his solo smash, We Fly High, but Camron insisted on a traditional Dipset group track. What could have been a trivial quarrel became out of control as old wounds were rekindled. Jim accused Cam of constantly attempting to monopolize the spotlight, while Cam retaliated for Jim's betrayal in going solo as the group was disintegrating. Things rapidly escalated. The room was crowded with security personnel, assistants, and hairdressers, all attempting to calm the situation down. But neither one was backing down. Insults turned into shoves, which turned into fists. One crew member described the experience as watching a family implode right in front of us. The struggle was more than simply physical, it was emotional. Both guys yelled words that had evidently been suppressed for years. Jim allegedly cried, "You left me out to dry when I needed you the most," while Cam responded, "You have always been envious of me." Admit it. Those close to the group believed that, while they had reconciled publicly in the past, things were never fully patched up behind closed doors. Tonight, all the foamy grins and forced interviews were undone in a matter of seconds. As the mayhem erupted backstage, the crowd in front grew restless. The event had been delayed for more than an hour, and spectators began chanting, confused of what was going on. Little did they realize that their favorite performers were being handcuffed only a few feet away. Police had come after security phoned them in to report a violent brawl that had hurt two staff members. One had a cracked lip, the other an injured wrist from attempting to separate Cam and Jim. When authorities got on the scene, they saw both rappers obviously beaten and still ranting at each other as they were hauled away. The footage of their arrest rapidly became viral. Someone on the crew videotaped Camron being led out in handcuffs, his face flushed with wrath. Jim Jones arrived soon after, his chain torn and his voice hoarse from shouting. The throng outside the venue watched in shock as the two were carried away in separate police cars. Fans yelled their names, Others begged them to stop, while others simply captured the moment in stunned stillness. What was intended to be a joyous comeback has instead become a nightmare. The news was quickly taken up by the media. Headlines such as Dipset reunion ends in chaos and Camron and Jim Jones arrested after backstage fight filled social media. People began circulating old video recordings of the couple laughing together in interviews, reminiscing about their connection and juxtaposing it to the recent dramatic breakdown. For many admirers, the betrayal seemed personal. "They raised us," a Twitter user remarked. "We grew up with Dipset. It feels like our big brothers are fighting." The internet was swamped with reactions, some startled, some outraged, and a few stating they saw this coming from a mile away. Cam and Jim didn't say anything to each other in jail that night. They were held in separate detention cells, and while their legal teams came swiftly, the harm had already been done. According to sources close to the event, both men were frightened not just by the battle, but also by the realization of how far they had fallen. According to one source, Jim continued pacing, wondering how things had come to this. Cam simply sat with his head down. It was the calm after the storm that spoke more than any punch could. Jules Santana, who was prepping in his dressing room when the brawl broke out, reportedly attempted to mediate once he saw things were becoming hot. But by the time he got there, it was too late. According to one of the crew members, Joel yelled, "Not like this man. Not after everything we've been through." His voice cracked as he witnessed two of his closest friends being hauled away by cops. The picture tormented him, and insiders say he fell down backstage, needing to be consoled by his teammates. The fallout was swift. Sponsors backed out of the tour, customers demanded refunds, and concert planners began to reconsider future Dipset events. Industry experts speculated that this may be the last nail in the coffin. "They were already on thin ice," explained one promoter. "This may be the end." Social media simply heightened the drama. Fans argued who was to blame, with some criticizing Camron of being overly controlling and others condemning Jim of being insecure and arrogant. But regardless of whatever side individuals took, the conclusion was clear: Dipset as we knew it may be over. Despite the mayhem, there were voices asking for peace. Fellow artists used social media to express their grief and desire for peace. One message said, "Come on, Dipset, you're all bigger than this. Fix it before it is too late." Another said, "Hip-hop needs you all together, not ripped apart like this." It was unclear whether such comments would reach Cam and Jim. As the dust cleared and the city struggled to understand what had just transpired, one thing became clear: nothing would ever be the same again. When everyone felt the drama had reached its pinnacle, something unexpected happened the following morning. A leaked voicemail began circulating online, purportedly from Jim Jones, and recorded just hours after the fight while he was still in detention. Jim's voice in the message was low, exhausted, and in pain. He talked slowly, as if each syllable was weighing him down. "I'm not furious with Cam, dude," he continued. "I'm mad at myself. We let the supporters down. We let Dipset down." The audio, which no one could confirm was genuine at first, spread like wildfire. By lunchtime, prominent hip-hop pages had reposted it with titles like "Jim Jones regrets everything" and "The end of Dipset hits harder than we thought." Fans were torn. Some people felt pity after hearing the remorse in his voice. Others questioned whether the voicemail was a deliberate attempt to attract public support. But behind the scenes, things were even more chaotic than anybody had anticipated. Camron hadn't said anything publicly. No tweets, no Instagram stories, not even a cryptic message. According to those close to him, he was outraged not only about the fight, but also about how fast Jim's camp began damage management. He thinks Jim's trying to spin the narrative, one source alleged. Cam feels deceived all over again. Meanwhile, Joel Santana was doing everything he could to keep things from coming apart altogether. He started reaching out to all sides, imploring them to discuss, meet, and clear the air. But neither Cam nor Jim was prepared. They were both too emotional, overwhelmed by years of unresolved tension. Even Weird Zeke, who had always provided comedic relief, became silent. His company issued a brief statement saying he was deeply saddened by the events and urging followers to give the group space to heal. What made matters worse was that the conflict had not only harmed Dipset, but had also reopened old scars in the hip-hop culture. Artists who had previously looked up to the group started speaking out. Some expressed their displeasure, while others told memories of previous confrontations they had observed directly. One unidentified producer told a site that he witnessed Cam and Jim arguing about money years ago during a recording session, and that the brotherhood had been cracking for a long time. Suddenly, the illusion of togetherness that Dipset had attempted to preserve crumbled utterly. Then came the security footage. Late that night, a fresh clip emerged from the venue's backstage surveillance camera. Unlike previous fan-filmed films, this one was extremely clear. It showed Camron pushing Jim into a stack of speaker cases, followed by Jim striking back and knocking over a table. The footage remained mute, but the brutality spoke for itself. Fans were appalled to watch their idols behaving in this manner. More footage showed crew workers hurrying to break up the altercation, with Jules leaping in and attempting to pull Jim away, while a security guard shoved the camera back against the wall. The footage rekindled the internet. Hashtags like #DipsetDownfall and #CamsJim started trending. News sites jumped on it, examining each frame like a sports replay. Body language specialists even chimed in, stating that Cam's position demonstrated deep-rooted frustration, while Jim's movement signaled emotional instability. It became a media circus. Memes proliferated, interviews were demanded, and talk shows began referring to the battle as the week's biggest pop cultural moment. But behind the scenes, the effects were becoming increasingly real. The label that funded the Dipset tour put everything on hold. Future concerts were canceled, contracts were frozen, and all reunion-related goods was removed off stores. And sources described the scenario as a financial disaster. Cam's crew blamed Jim, claiming that his fury had wrecked everything. Jim's crew blamed Cam, describing him as manipulative and dominating. Caught in the middle were scores of workers, dancers, and tech crew members who had been counting on the tour for jobs, but were now unemployed. Camron, known for his fiery tongue and scathing retorts, eventually broke his silence 2 days later. He shared a dark screen on Instagram with the caption, "Sometimes silence speaks louder than words." Supporters were perplexed. Was it shade? Was it acceptance? Was that the end? In the comments, speculation ran rampant. Some asked for a truce, while others accused Cam of being passive-aggressive. Meanwhile, Jim Jones posted a short Instagram live video, obviously distraught, saying, "We're supposed to be legends, not headlines. I'm ashamed of how I acted. I lost my cool. But I'm not the only one." As predicted, this just poured fuel to the flames. Cam's fans accused Jim of gaslighting. Jim's followers backed him, stating that at the very least, he was admitting his mistakes. In the middle of all this tumult, Dipset's legacy was gradually dissolving. Radio stations removed Dipset music from their regular playlists, uncertain how the audience would respond. Podcasts dedicated whole segments to the conflict, with some claiming that it was the most public group collapse since NWA. Others linked it to the demise of the G-Unit. One presenter stated, "This is what happens when ego is uncontrolled for too long." Then came the biggest twist of all. A woman stepped forward, alleging that she observed the incident and that it was not about music at all, but over a woman. According to her, Camron and Jim Jones had long been romantically involved with the same lady, and recent circumstances had reignited that conflict. She stated that Jim found out Cam had covertly reunited with her, which triggered the altercation backstage. Nobody could confirm her account, but the internet didn't care. It was spicy, sensational, and just the type of twist fans hoped for. Memes erupted again, this time depicting the fight as a love triangle gone awry. People joked that Dipset was the new reality television drama. Others voiced dismay, claiming that two icons should never abandon decades of heritage for a woman. However, regardless of whether the tale was real, it altered the narrative once more. People weren't simply seeing a group break apart. They were witnessing lives collapse in real time, and they couldn't take their gaze away. Cam and Jim were now out on bond, but were ordered by the court not to see each other until the matter was completed. The irony was not lost on anyone. Two guys who had previously traversed the world together could no longer be in the same room. Lawyers were involved, damage control teams worked hard, and the hip-hop community waited to see what happened next. As one seasoned musician stated in a radio interview, "This ain't beef. This is heartbreaking." But just when things appeared to be at their lowest point, a surprising phone call was made, one that no one expected, and one that would affect everything going forward. As the days passed and the populace waited in expectation, tensions increased. Behind the scenes, Camron and Jim Jones were coping with more than just emotional fallout. They were also grappling with the consequences of their conduct. Fans, the media, and even their closest friends were split about what had transpired. The fact was that no one knew what the future held for Dipset. Could they rescue what remained of their legacy, or was the harm irreversible? Camron, known for his calm attitude, had been unusually silent following the event. His social media profiles, which were normally full of cryptic comments and gags, had gone strangely silent. Fans, especially those who had backed him for years, were becoming concerned. They'd never seen Camron like this before. He was always the one to lighten the mood and transform drama into comedy. But this time, his posts lacked comedy. He was not even posting. The quiet was louder than any words he could have spoken. On the other side, Jim Jones was more outspoken. His Twitter account was full of remarks regarding the incident, including apologies to fans, Dipset supporters, and even Camron. "It's been a rough road, but I'm learning and growing," a tweet from him said. However, admirers were not totally convinced. Some congratulated him for admitting his sins, while others said it was simply another ruse to reclaim the affection he had lost. "Real men admit when they're wrong," one admirer said, "but that doesn't change the fact that the damage has already been done. We will not forget what occurred, Jim." The diverse reactions appeared to add fuel to the flames. However, despite the drama and public discord, there remained a feeling of inevitability. The big issue loomed over everything. Would Dipset break up for good? Was this the end of one of the most famous hip-hop symbols of all time? Rumors circulated, with some alleging that Camron and Jim Jones hadn't talked in days and others suggesting that a reconciliation was conceivable, but only if certain conditions were satisfied. Fans were torn. Some still believed in the group's strength and the tie that had brought them together years before. Others felt deceived, their commitment rattled to its core. Meanwhile, Jules Santana, who had always served as a go-between for the two, found himself caught in the thick of everything. According to those close to him, Joel was upset and wounded by the situation. He had worked so hard to keep Cam and Jim at peace, and now it appeared like all of his efforts were unraveling. Despite his indignation, Jules was resolved to set things right. He realized that if there was any prospect of making things right, it had to begin with him. So Julius took matters into his own hands. He contacted Camron and Jim Jones individually, hoping to arrange a private encounter. He knew it had to be face-to-face. No more phone calls, no more mysterious messages. It had to be genuine. Jules was prepared to do everything to save Dipset. After several difficult days, Jules was able to bring both Camron and Jim Jones into the same room. The occasion was momentous. The two decided to communicate for the first time since the incident. However, when they eventually sat down, the atmosphere was heavy with anxiety. Camron, famed for his sharp tongue and quick wit, was oddly silent. In contrast, Jim Jones was more open. He had been considering the repercussions of his conduct, and he was prepared to confront anything. The room was eerily still as the two men sat across from one another, the weight of their history and recent fallout hanging thick in the air. Finally, Camron ended the stillness. His voice was steady, yet there was a distinct edge to it. "You know, Jim," he began slowly, "I never expected to be sitting here with you after what happened. You disrespected me, not just in front of fans, but also in front of family members." "That stung." Jim Jones, visibly regretful, responded, "I know. and I can't take it back. But now that I'm here, I'd want to remedy this. I want us to get through this, Cam. I am sorry." Camron hesitated for a time, as if considering his choices. After a long pause, he said, "You've mentioned that before, Jim. However, deeds speak louder than words." It was obvious that there was still a lot of hurt and mistrust between them. However, as the session progressed, it appeared like reconciliation was feasible. They discussed their common past, including the days when Dipset was at the pinnacle of the rap game. They laughed, remembered, and for a few minutes, it felt like they were back in the studio together, creating magic. But reality quickly hit in. The harm had been done, and recovery would not be simple. Meanwhile, supporters were still waiting for a public comment from both Camron and Jimmy Jones. Their suspense was them. They sought answers. They wanted to know if Dipset was truly over or if the two could work it out. Fans flocked to social media in droves, expecting an update. "We need to understand what is going on. Is Dipset over?" One fan tweeted, "You've both hurt the fans. You now need to correct this." The strain was rising. Camron and Jim Jones could not hide indefinitely. Finally, the moment arrived. Camron shared a new statement on Instagram. It was brief but spoke a lot. "Sometimes the strongest ties are tested. We have gone through a lot. We will work it out. Stay tuned." Jim Jones followed suit with a message of his own. "Serious talk. We've been down too long. We are stronger than this. Stay with us." While these communications did not provide specific solutions, they provided followers hope. I'm hoping that Dipset wasn't done after all. However, the question remained, was it too little too late? Can the supporters forgive them for the public show, conflict, and betrayal? Or had Camron and Jim Jones gone too far and ruined the organization beyond repair? The next days would reveal more, but for the time being, everything remained uncertain. The hip-hop community kept a close eye on the story as it evolved. Camron and Jim Jones, two rap giants who previously controlled the game together, were now vying for their legacy. Will they find a way to heal? Was Dipset truly over? As word of the backstage battle spread like wildfire, the hip-hop industry was shaken to its core. Camron and Jim Jones, two of the founding members of the iconic group Dipset, were engaged in a violent altercation that no one could have anticipated. Fans, media outlets, and even their professional counterparts were stunned as the fight's specifics emerged. What had begun as a night of celebration suddenly devolved into mayhem, and it appeared that Dipset's future was in peril. The backstage incident was alleged to have escalated rapidly, spurred by years of unresolved emotions between the two performers. According to accounts, words were exchanged before a physical brawl ensued, resulting in both Camron and Jim Jones being detained on the spot. The scenario was characterized as heated, with both artists apparently throwing fists and creating a spectacle that could not be ignored. Witnesses at the scene reported that security had to intervene, but the damage had already been done. The altercation not only left an indelible mark on the event, but it also left viewers wondering whether the two renowned characters could ever mend their shattered friendship. In the days that followed, conjecture began to circulate. Rumors concerning the origins of the fight spread like wildfire. Some believed it was a personal fight between the two, while others cited deeper concerns inside the organization. Fans who had formerly seen Camron and Jim Jones as brothers in arms were now doubting the loyalty that had once characterized Dipset. Could they ever reconcile following this public act of violence? Or was this the final straw, bringing the group's history to an end for good? While some supporters remained hopeful, others used social media to voice their dismay. "This is it, the end of an era," one tweet stated. "The Dipset was the finest, but if they can't even get along, what hope do we have?" The comments section was filled with similar thoughts as fans attempted to accept the abrupt breakup of one of hip-hop's most important groups. For years, Camron and Jim Jones had been the faces of Dipset, but now their quarrel was throwing a pall over everything they had accomplished. Camron, who has never shied away from controversy, addressed the incident on social media. In a series of posts, he voiced his fury, claiming that he had attempted to keep the peace. but the betrayal he felt was too much to bear. "Some people will never change," he added. "I did my part, but when you're always watching your back, it's time to go on." His statements were harsh, and they appeared to confirm what many had suspected. Dipset, as a group, was no longer a functioning organization. But even though Camron's message appeared to mark the end of an era, Jim Jones was not ready to give up yet. Jim Jones, on the other hand, used a more subtle approach. While his emotions were clearly running high, he wrote a message implying the prospect of reconciliation. "We've been through too much together to let one fight define us." His words went, "I'm not prepared to walk away, not yet." His statements provided a ray of hope to supporters who still believed in the closeness between him and Camron. Could the two legends reconcile their differences and rebuild what they once shared? Was the harm irreparable? As the crisis progressed, the media began to weigh in, with some picking sides and others keeping impartial. Hip-hop blogs, podcasts, and news outlets all chimed in on the drama, with many wondering if the public feud was a mere setback or a lasting fracture. The timing of the confrontation was especially unsettling, as Dipset was ready to embark on a highly anticipated reunion tour. Fans had been longing for years to see the trio back on stage together, and now it appeared that dream was sliding further away. In an exclusive interview, Jules Santana, who has always been caught in the thick of Camron and Jim Jones feuds, spoke out about the issue. He voiced his dissatisfaction, saying that he had done everything he could to keep the two men at peace, but it was evident that both men had reached their breaking points. "We were brothers, man," Jules replied, his voice full of sorrow. "But occasionally things change. People change. I can't force something that doesn't exist anymore." His statements expressed the anguish and inevitability of the situation. Dipset had been a family, but it appeared that the family was disintegrating. The public outcry over the brawl grew, and pressure on both Camron and Jim Jones increased. Their admirers were divided, with some expressing anger and disappointment, while others remained hopeful for a resolution. "We need Dipset back together," a fan commented on Instagram. "They were the best. Do not let this be the end." However, as time passed, it became evident that this was not a trivial issue. There were deeper concerns at play that could not be overlooked or neglected. As Camron and Jim Jones attempted to deal with the repercussions of the fight, they were forced to confront their own demons. Old grudges, buried resentments, and sentiments of betrayal started to emerge. What had once been a fraternity founded on trust and commitment appeared to be collapsing under the weight of ego, pride, and miscommunication. It was evident that the path to reconciliation would be difficult, and even the most hopeful followers began to lose hope. The crisis worsened, and in the days that followed, speculations regarding Dipset's future spread. Some outlets indicated that Camron had already begun working on new music without Jim Jones, while others speculated that Jones was exploring a solo career. Neither rapper acknowledged nor disputed the reports, but it was evident that the group's fate was questionable. As time passed, it became clear that Dipset, as fans knew it, was no longer the dominant force it once was. The last nail in the coffin came when Camron and Jim Jones both posted cryptic remarks on social media, thus ending their business partnership. Camron's message stated, "Sometimes you have to let go. There is no love lost, yet it's time to go on." Jim Jones posted a similar message. "It's not always about being correct. It is about moving on." Their statements crushed supporters' hearts, but also made them accept that Dipset was no longer a viable organization. The aftermath from the backstage fighting had been massive, and while Camron and Jim Jones had previously been inseparable, their fight had demonstrated that even the most powerful relationships could be severed. For Dipset aficionados, it marked the end of an era characterized by breakthrough music, great events, and undeniable cultural effect. As the chapter on Dipset concluded, one question remained: would Camron and Jim Jones ever reconcile? Only time will tell. However, it appeared that Dipset was finally ended. What an emotional roller coaster, right? Camron and Jim Jones' backstage scuffle has shocked fans, and the future of Dipset is questionable. What are your thoughts on all the turmoil, treachery, and heartbreak? Do you think Camron and Jimmy Jones will ever reconcile, or is this the end of Dipset for good? Please share your ideas in the comments section below. We want to hear from you. Don't forget to like this video if you were astonished by the explosive turn of events, and subscribe for more breaking news. We'll keep you up to date on the newest events involving Camron, Jim Jones, and the future of Dipset. And if you're a genuine Dipset fan, you won't want to miss out on what's next. Hit the notification bell to never miss a fresh update. Keep the conversation continuing by sharing this video with your friends and discussing what happened. Until next time, stay tuned for more drama, updates, and celebrity gossip. You won't want to miss this.